Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, I have Christina Butler with me. She is the professor of historic preservation at the American College of the Building Arts. I hope that I got all of that down. I tried to write it fast.
It was perfect.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for joining me. So tell me about your background.
So I'm one of the few people who at a fairly young age knew exactly what I wanted to do. I loved history and old buildings from earliest memory, like age 3, watching this old house. And I knew that's what I wanted to do, but had the misfortune of most folks not knowing what preservation is. And
Right.
So when I said, I want to work on old buildings, the response was always, oh, well, architecture school, but I didn't really want to learn to design modern buildings. I wanted to work on historic.
Right.
So I guess my earliest somewhat professional education was I went to trade school for 2 years. I did a construction technology program. So that was great. That was a high school program where you went for half the day. And we learned everything from actually a little bit of restoration work. We did window sash, rebuild and glazing, which was so fun. But the bulk of the program was new construction. So that was really great because we learned to read construction documents and do estimating. We did a little bit of plumbing, sheetrock, framing, you name it. And then when I finished that, I still wanted to work on old buildings and didn't really know where to go for that. So for about a year, I was a civil engineering major because it was somewhat built environment related. Mm-hmm. And while I was in the process of that program, luckily pretty early on, I found a program at College of Charleston almost by accident. I'd always wanted to move down here anyway, because I knew it was the biggest historic district in the country. And on vacation, I went down one of the side streets of College of Charleston campus and saw a building sign for historic preservation headquarters. And I said, And I walked in and grabbed a brochure and realized that was what I had inarticulately been trying to patch together
right
out of different programs. So I promptly transferred and did my undergrad in preservation, and then continued doing construction and preservation kind of on the side. Lucked out and got a really good internship with a restoration contractor. And then decided I really liked going to school, which is something I never thought I'd say, but I just sort of kept going. Did a master's in American history and eventually decided, I think I really want to teach. And so for the last 11 years, that's been my main gig is teaching, but I still do a lot of preservation consulting and stuff on the side.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. And I don't formally teach. I thought about it after I got my master's degree, and I thought about, because my master's degree is, or my educational background's in business, not preservation. So I was like thinking, like, should I, teach marketing? Because I really enjoy marketing. But then I'm like, I just like to teach people about preservation. So that's just what I use our marketing for.
Nice. Tailor it to your own desires.
Yes. Yeah. So, but listening to you, talk about your kind of your path, had me think about a couple of things. We had probably now almost like 15 years ago, we had someone who actually came to us to learn the building trade after he graduated from architecture school, because he wanted to learn to build before. And he was like, we took him to like the traditional building conferences and things. Like, he's like, I never heard anybody talk about like the American architectural styles in architectural school.
It's a travesty.
Yeah. And he's like, we just talked about how to build and design. And that was really strange to me.
Yeah. Well, and architecture and construction are such divorced fields in a way that's really sort of counterintuitive to a successful building program. And, world history of architecture, same thing he encountered. There's hardly any America. And I know it's a newer country, but not only were we sort of the world leader of steel framing for a pretty long time, but most folks who live here, those are the kind of buildings they're going to be working on.
Right. Yeah. And it's not brand new. It's not like
right. We've been around a while now.
So, but that was interesting to me because, I heard that from him. And actually then he did end up going and getting his architectural license, and now he owns his own firm. But one of the things that, he had left us right before the recession in 08. And he was working on getting his license, and they actually laid a lot of people off in the firm, but kept him because he had understanding of how buildings worked. And so it was an important for him to have learned that. So I think there would be benefit from both sides to understand both sides better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my construction trade program, I use it constantly. I mean, in teaching in the field, and it really did give me an edge because most people who do a preservation undergrad, they don't have any construction experience through no fault of their own, but they can't read plans. They probably haven't really been on a job site. So I really lucked out being able to sort of put those two things together from a kind of a practical standpoint.
Yeah. And it's great that your program also is teaching how to repair things, because I think that's missing from a lot of programs. Mostly it's just installing new materials.
Yeah. So College of Charleston, where I did my undergrad, I adjunct for them. I just teach whatever one class they most need, which is usually intro, gets majors, gets people excited. In that program, you do have to take drafting. What do they call it? Forgetting the name of the title of the class. Preservation Planning Studio. That's what it's called, which is great because not all programs require that.
Right.
And I teach building pathology for them, and we do some site visits and kind of talk about how buildings were built and how they break down and how to repair them. But where I teach now, my main job is teaching at American College of the Building Arts. And it's a small, about 150 student, 4-year liberal arts program. And it's not to oversell it, but I always say, had it existed back in the day when I went to college, I would have come here because it basically marries all the things I had to sort of put together on my own. So students here, they major in traditional trades. So timber framing, stone carving, blacksmith, plaster. We have a traditional architecture program and architectural carpentry. And so regardless of your trade, whether you're a designer or, a blacksmith, they all have to take architectural history with me. They have to take a preservation sequence also with myself, building material science. Right. So it's great because all the gen eds are tailored towards the built environment, even science, which, makes it an easier pill to swallow usually.
for the liberal arts portion. But it makes sense though, because so much of building and especially traditional building, but so much of building is understanding how the different pieces interact with each other.
100%.
And it is science-based, and it is, understanding what, if this material is touching this, what will happen. And sometimes you just learn that, trial and error, and you've made mistakes and you realize you get the call back.
Yeah, oops, the cleaner ate the stone. I shan't use that again.
But there are I think that's really valuable program. I'm glad to learn about it. Thank you. So I know you talked about preservation from being a 3-year-old and wanting to learn more. So do you know what drew you into preservation, or did it just look interesting, or?
I just, something, I guess I'm hardwired. I just always was really interested in buildings and couldn't really articulate it as a kid. I was always interested in construction and how things are put together. But my other earliest interest, besides liking horses, what 3-year-old doesn't? Although I stuck with that also.
You were very, you didn't deviate. You found what you liked and you stayed with it.
Right. I had that path and I was on it and I was lucky to know what that path was. But I also really liked history. And I think one of the things that pulled me towards preservation was the fact that we can learn so much about, the past and cultures and what societies valued, about technology and lack thereof from looking at buildings. So it was a really tangible historic resource where people can get excited about it in a way. You can read a textbook, but buildings exist in front of you.
Right.
And so they're a really effective teaching tool. And sort of attached to that was the fact that everything ages, buildings are no different, and just this desire to tell their stories and prevent them from being lost, because anything, preservation is maintenance. And so I became really interested in how things were built, why that changed over time, and ultimately how to keep those buildings around for the future. So I was always super interested in kind of the physical aspects of preservation, the trade aspects.
I think that's great. And I think when you were talking about, loving history, I think that was probably like the first glimpse of me wanting to do preservation, because that was not my initial path. Like all through high school, I was going to be a social worker. That's what I was going to do. I got accepted to multiple bachelor's degree programs to be a social worker. And then my senior year of high school, I got really sick with my wisdom teeth for like 4 months. I was sick. And I was home from school a lot. They couldn't figure out what was wrong because this is like completely off subject, but my wisdom teeth were infected, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong. I just kept getting sinus infections. So I would, take antibiotics, get better, but it wasn't solving the problem because my wisdom teeth were still there. So once they figured out that it was my wisdom teeth, they removed them and I was fine. But I was home from school like a lot my senior year of high school. And I was watching like daytime TV and there was like a pastry, like learn to be a pastry chef commercial. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And so but my whole senior year, because I didn't want to take math, I didn't want to take science, my whole senior year was full of history classes. I was in the social studies wing the entire week, or the entire day. And my dad, worked on older buildings. That's how I got into preservation eventually. My dad, was a preservation carpenter. But, I grew up around it, but I didn't think that was like a path for me. But that, like looking back and my love of history and wanting to take all those different history classes, that was like the first glimpse that I was headed in this direction. And then I went to culinary art school.
Silver linings of being stuck at home for 4 months senior year, the worst, when all the fun stuff is supposed to happen. But you found a life path, and that's more important than going to prom.
So anyway, I think my parents were a little shocked. I'm like, I'm going to go to culinary art school, but they supported it, and I did that. And then after I got out, I worked at a bakery for a few years, and then I got married and I started working for my parents, and that's how I ended up here.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then I went back to school, but so tell me about the work you do. You've mentioned your teaching, but do you do other things also?
I do. So, the main gig is teaching. So I teach architectural history and historic preservation, a couple different courses in each of those. And then currently, and I'll probably have to give this up soon because we're growing and there's too many sections of, youngins for architectural history. Yeah. But right now I teach our capstone class, and that's a lot of fun because it's a year long. So in the fall, they have to basically conceptualize a project, do the design development. If it's an architecture student, if it's a trade student, do the shop drawings, right, come up with a schedule for spring, a budget. And then in the spring, they execute their pieces.
Oh, that's great.
That's really fun because, I have more background in carpentry than any of the other trades, but it's fun because I have students of each trade
Yeah.
and they're learning, and you learn something, when I'm 80, I'll still learn something from every different project.
Yeah.
And that's what makes traditional architecture and preservation so fun, is it's not like we're stick framing this exactly the same as the one we did 80 of last week.
Right. Yeah.
So
we have a pretty well-known trade school here in town, but they're mostly focused on modern building. And they have houses that they build and resell.
Yeah.
But they all look the same. Like, I think that would get so boring.
Well, it's like once you learn it, and we did that, like we built a 2,400 square foot house senior year for the construction program. And it was great because you learn so much about the steps and the process. And we did it, and then they'd auction it, and that would pay for the material for the next year. But once you kind of have that down, not that any of it's easy, but the techniques don't really change that much. And so it was a great basis, but it was the historic stuff I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So the students here, some of them will be, preservation practitioners, some will be doing custom, new stuff for whatever, probably for, custom residential, but short story long, that's a lot of fun, that class. And some of them have to get permits because we're in the historic district. So helping them walk through that.
That's a good learning process too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they learn the hard way that there's no speeding up bureaucracy. It might take 3 months. So we have these deadlines, like if you need permits or this type of material, like let's talk about lead time. So that's fun. But then my other job, I have a small company called Butler Preservation, and it's basically a property research company. So I do National Register nominations. I do house histories just for people who say, oh, I bought this, I'm so excited, tell me everything. And then I do preservation plans too. So coming over and telling somebody the age, how to fix things.
Right.
I do a lot of work for architects when they need to pull Board of Architectural Review permits, and they have to do their, precedent research.
Right.
So that's a lot of fun. And I used to do more hands-on stuff through my company, like window sash rebuilds. But because I teach so many classes, I can't really say, okay, I'm pulling out your 5 windows and I'll be back in 3 months. Let me just give you some plywood. So now I really only do physical preservation work during the summer when I have like more time to devote. And this is going to sound terrible, but I've gotten picky about it because it's just only so much time.
Right. Yeah. And you want to be able to put your efforts towards things that you're passionate about and that you enjoy doing, especially since you have a limited amount of time. Not that you're not passionate about your teaching, because I can definitely tell that you are.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But I never want to do anything that I'm going to cut corners on. Like I want to have time to do it right. Butler Preservation's been a lot of fun. I guess the most interesting project I'm working on right now, and this was in Preservation Magazine, NTHP, a couple years ago. There's a really interesting 1880s house called Hutchinson House. I thought I had a picture on my wall somewhere behind me, but it's on Edisto Island, which is a kind of coastal sea island close to Charleston. And it had been in one family until about 2016, had a lot of deferred maintenance, they'd moved away, but it was basically, despite some condition issues, some rather serious ones.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was almost frozen in time. So that project, the initial research I did with my preservation students. And so, folks will contact the college and they say, I have this cool building. I don't even know where to start. Can you help me? And so if it's a good fit, and I think the students will learn and the client, needs some help, can't afford a preservation consultant, we'll tackle it.
Okay. So, that's great. That's a great win-win for everybody.
Yeah. And then the student can say they had like a real world client to put on a resume. So we did, a house history and condition assessment and preservation plan for that house. And then several of the students got to go back and do the first phase of stabilization work because they were working for one of our alums whose preservation contracting company basically got that contract. So that was really cool because they wrote the plan and then a year later they got to go do the work. Short story long, that house, the group that owns it, Edisto Island Open Land Trust, they got an NPS grant and a SHPO grant to do the next phase of work. And what makes the house so important, it's a kind of vernacular balloon framed kind of situation.
Yeah.
It's cute, local material, like very vernacular, like Carpenter Gothic-esque kind of details. But it's the oldest and most intact surviving house on that island built by freed people.
Oh, awesome.
And so it's this really great kind of Reconstruction era piece of history.
Yeah. Is it in danger from like the sea level rise, or?
Knock on wood, no. It's pretty far inland. It's also was built up on traditional brick piers. So it have to be, again, knock on wood, it'd have to be a pretty major one.
Yeah.
But its main threat was just, deferred maintenance. The sill beam on the back of the house was like cracked. There's holes in the roof, there's holes in the floor. So we had to be, okay, students, 2 in each room at a time and space yourselves out. But now it's stabilized and the exterior's restored, and I put in a bid and got it through Butler Preservation to write the developmental history of the interior and the porches, because they've got money to basically reconstruct the lost original wraparound porches. And we've got some really good photos of it. And the replacement little portico on the front by 2018 was kind of toast anyway. So they weren't really removing any fabric. They sort of had to for repairs. So it created this great opportunity to really bring the house back. So currently I'm working on that. And that's been a lot of fun to sort of see that house through a bunch of different phases.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, that sounds exciting. That does sound like a very exciting project. So what I think how I came to know about you was the article in the Charleston newspaper about your new old house. So tell me a little bit about your personal project.
So that article in the city paper was a lot of fun, and I think probably the best compliment I've ever received is he called me a preservation badass in the article. Like, I didn't know you could print that, but I'll take it. That's
you can get it on a shirt.
It's like I need bumper stickers that say that. But so our house, my husband and I, he's a historian for the county library, and I'm a preservationist. So we're a very nerdy bunch. Like the dinner table conversations is just anything history related. But I had a small historic house from the 1920s, and it had been badly flipped. I had it for about 9 years, kind of worked on one phase of it at a time, which I don't know if you've encountered that, but when you're trying to do it while you live in it, it's kind of a nightmare.
Yes.
Yeah, it's rough. So I sort of got the house where I wanted. And then Nick, the husband, he found a vacant lot a few blocks away. Like, he moved into my historic house, sold his little suburban house, because I said, no way am I moving to the suburbs. You can come live with me in the weird part of downtown in my little house. And he did. And the vacant lot was just a couple blocks away, but both of us really like 18th century kind of early Georgian, just minimalist, traditional aesthetic. And Charleston's price point is such that we would never be able to afford an 18th century house here. And the more we thought about it, we thought, well, so many houses that live to be 250, they're modified so much that a lot of that original character is gone. Wouldn't it be fun if we could sort of create, granted, we used sheetrock because we couldn't afford plaster, so we cheated a little bit, but wouldn't it be fun to basically be able to recreate an 18th century early house that never got messed with or modified? So I have a specialty contractor license, so I can do painting, wallpaper hanging, sheetrock, trim carpentry, that kind of stuff. So we decided to design the house ourselves. And Nick did all the plans, and he would show me something and I'd say, oh, that's not an accurate trim profile, or that's too expensive, redraw that. And he was a good sport, and he did repeatedly. And, in South Carolina, you don't need an architect. You just need a structural engineer to stamp your plan. So we didn't really, architects are great, but we knew what we wanted. We didn't really need the design guidance. So he finished the plans. We got them stamped. We took it to the Board of Architectural Review because it's a cool working class area, but it's actually in the historic district. Yeah. So we had to go through, the same steps you would have to in an expensive part of Charleston, even though it is becoming, but isn't crazy yet. So we found.
Were they very receptive to your plan? Did it go through pretty well?
It did. However, and I can say this because the thing is built, so it doesn't matter now. Currently, our Board of Architecture is not really big fans of what they would call traditional or sort of fake historic.
Okay.
They actually kind of prefer something that's more of a, modern,
contemporary.
Yeah. And that's not our jam. And so when we took our drawings, we took them several times to the city architect, because ultimately it's like taking something to the National Register. The review board votes, but the SHPO is going to give you feedback and be like, hey, that's probably not going to fly. So we met several times with the city architect, and he kept saying, oh, well, this feature's too traditional. And he gave us some really good suggestions, but a lot of it we said, well, thanks for the advice. We're going to go for it.
Right.
And it's basically, people regularly go past it and think it's older than it is, which, it's kind of what we were going for.
Right.
That's, preservation ethics of 2022 aside, it's our house.
Right.
We wanted it to look the way we wanted. And we actually didn't have much trouble, because if we weren't going for neoclassical grandeur, the house doesn't have piazzas with Tuscan columns. It basically looks like a pre-Georgian early house. It's a box, and it has a simple hip roof. And so really the aesthetic of 18th century vernacular is kind of minimalist.
Right. Yeah.
So in a way, a modernist can sort of be okay with that, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we did get permission to use cypress beaded bevel siding, which you are allowed to use hardy plank, but we didn't want to.
Right.
And we got permission to get 9/9 true divided light windows, which we were excited because they're double glazed, but they're wood and they look traditional. And we were kind of expecting them to say, oh no, those are too historic, but they let us do pretty much everything.
That's
we wanted.
great. Yeah, that's great. I sit on so we have in Lancaster City, we have two different review boards. We have the HARB, which is the historic architectural review board, which is like the much more strict. They review light fixtures and different things for the exterior. And then I sit on the historical commission, which is pretty much the rest of the city, but it's just reviewing like new construction, additions, and any demolitions.
Okay.
So I feel so out of my depth when they're reviewing new construction, because I'm like, I don't care. You're building in a parking lot. Like,
right. Like, it's gonna look the same as the box next to it. I don't care.
Now I have comments when they have plans to demolish and things like that. But but I agree that like most of what everybody's bringing before us is very modern, very, very contemporary. And a few meetings ago, they brought a building that they're actually moving, but on the same lot. They're just moving it. It's right in the middle of the lot right now. They're moving it away, and they're putting a deck on the back, and it looks like a stage. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like one of those stages that slide out in the gymnasium.
Oh no, that's not a good aesthetic.
No. And I said, I know the Secretary of Interior standard says, distinct but compatible, and I know you're in the distinct camp. I'm probably in the more compatible camp.
Yeah, same. Especially like in in a working class area, and I say that meaning simple 2-story
Right.
wood
Yeah.
frame
Yeah.
houses.
Not fancy houses. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been weird to try and put in the beach house on stilts or
Right.
something that was
Yeah.
just jarring.
Yeah.
So we were trying, the house is a little bit taller than the neighbors
Yeah.
because of FEMA, because
Right.
we're on the coast. And we actually, this is rare to get to. We were really lucky, but we had to build 4.5 foot up for base flood.
Yeah.
And we asked permission to go up another 2.5 feet to
That
hit
was smart.
7.
Yeah.
And they usually won't let you because they don't want the houses to be
Right.
just like a jagged tooth, one that's too tall. But we made the argument that in Charleston, there's a precedent for having a full raised basement.
Yeah.
Usually with a couple windows on the front, and that area would have essentially been storage. It wasn't finished space. It was
Right.
kind of sacrificial for flooding reasons. So they let us do it because there was a precedent for doing it. And we were taking design cues from the community.
Yeah.
And so it's high enough that I have a workshop under there. So I've got my workbench and I'm, able to do my carpentry work kind of under the footprint of the house. But from the street, it looks like a traditional house.
Oh, I
So
think
it was a really fun project.
Yeah,
And we had a GC. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's really smart because I have had a house mover on the podcast before, and he told me that they move houses, but they also raise them up, in coastal areas. And he told me that there's several projects that they've had to go back and raise again because of addition. So that's really smart to go a little bit higher so you don't have to revisit it.
Yeah. And, in our city, until just a couple of years ago, the BAR really frowned on elevating historic houses, but we've had so many, granted, they were all category 1s, but a lot of them hit at high tide. And we've had so many significant rain events back to back that basically the city had to recognize a building can only flood so many times before the owner says, I can't afford that deductible. I'm out.
Right. Yeah. And
so
who's going to want to insure it? Yeah.
Right. If you can even get insurance,
Right.
and then if you can, that deductible is still really expensive. So the city's gotten a lot better at kind of responding to that stuff. And we were lucky. And so we had a general contractor, and then I had them basically sub all the finished work to me. So that's kind of how we afforded it and kept it the way we wanted. And all the color palette is 18th century historically accurate colors. The trim profiles are all accurate.
That's great.
A lot of nerdy love and research went into that.
I think it's great. So can you like someone that wants to plan a new old house, do you have any tips for them?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think a lot of it is, don't reinvent the wheel. Traditional architecture, tradition, sure, it can be stifling, but largely it exists because people learned. They learned what worked and what didn't. So planning a new old house, I think really your design cues should come from historic buildings in that community for starters. And secondly, is go for simplicity. I wish I had this book. It's in my library at home, so I'm going to forget the name of the author, but it's basically how to build a new old house.
Okay.
And it was a fabulous book. It's probably like early 2010s or something. And granted, it was a higher price point, kind of fancier than what we were going for. But I would recommend that book to anybody. And one of the things the architect, again, sorry, I can't remember, but his design approach was almost sort of arts and craftsy, where the houses he was designing looked like they had grown over time.
Right.
Where, like Webb's brick house, where it's like, oh, well, this was all built in the 1760s, but it has these kind of interesting intersecting roof lines. And we had a small lot because it's downtown. And so we had to deal with that. But we kind of went the opposite, where our house, it's a Charleston single house, which is the ones that are narrow facing the street. And the size of it is based on historic precedent. So it's like 17 wide by 42 long, just 2 stories stacked over that raised basement. And instead of wanting it to look like a house that kind of rambled and grew over time, we wanted it to look like a 1750 house no one messed with. Yeah. And so we didn't want bump outs where you're like, oh, well, there's the bathroom. Right. So like it obviously has one. We made concessions. It has,
Well, and I was actually thinking that's the benefit to your approach, is that you got like the traditional look, the traditional feel, but you didn't have that retrofit.
Exactly.
of the bathroom, of the kitchen, of the modern necessities.
Yeah. And that's the struggle. And we need those in houses, but a lot of damage is done stylistically and
Right.
structurally.
Yeah.
So we were lucky because we could say, okay, here's the historic footprint. How do we fit everything in that without having to have weird bump outs? And we were able to do it. And Nick gets the credit for that. He figured out how to put in this tiny little side hall that allowed us to have like an ensuite downstairs for when the parents are old
Right.
and have to move in. But I think my best advice would really be just, decide what it is you like about old houses in the first place.
Right.
And just incorporate it, tradition, it exists for a reason.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. So what trends or challenges do you see in preservation from kind of your vantage point?
Ooh, it's like, I could use pages and pages. I think, so keeping it concise, I think for us in coastal communities, whether it's, Ellicott City or Newport or Charleston, rising sea level and increasing flooding is a big challenge because most of our built environment, really everywhere in the world, it's all on the waterfront, for shipping, for water access, for a host of reasons. But that means some of our most important communities are at ground zero, and they always have been, but it's getting harder, especially in Charleston. We're just building so much new stuff. We're just cramming. Everyone wants to be here. It's a beautiful place.
Right.
And so it's challenging now to figure out like how to fit increasingly large volumes into this small historic city without causing more flooding because you lost permeable surface.
Right.
B, without losing the character that makes people want to come here. Yeah. So I think that's a huge challenge. And from like a broader picture, kind of throughout the US, I think there's a real shortage of trade practitioners. And, everyone always talks about the skills gap. And folks will be like, oh, well, we'll do a field school, we'll have a 3-week workshop. And
well, yeah, those drive me crazy. 3 weeks isn't enough.
I know, like, I don't want to detract, but it's like, okay, now someone knows enough to be dangerous.
They know the buzzwords and they can go in and convince people they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Or, get a project management job that they actually don't know how to do. Right. So I think those kind of programs, whether it's a 6-month thing or a 3-week thing, I think they're a great starting point. And I think they can lead people towards great careers, but
it's a way to know that you're interested.
Exactly. It's not an end all. And I think people, modern folks, people who are alive in 2022, it's really easy, and we all are guilty of this, to look at something else and say, oh, that looks fun. How hard could that be?
Right.
Well, actually,
I do that. I do that all the time. And then I get in the middle of this project and I'm like, oh, that was not as much fun as I imagined.
Right. The planning it was fun. And then I tried to do it and yikes, this was worse than I was expecting. And I'm the eternal optimist. I always go into projects. I'm like, oh, this won't be too hard. And then it's an epic disaster because you find a rotten wall and you're like, well, now it's not just the jam. I'm fixing to have to reframe like part of this wall. Yeah. If we always thought about that, we would never tackle projects, to be fair. But I think there's just a real shortage of trade practitioners. And I think it's going to take a long time to fix that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it, just working here has taught me, your average person, not our audience, they obviously know all this stuff. We're preaching to the choir, but if you ask somebody what plaster is, a lot of people actually don't know.
Right.
They don't understand that that's rendered onto a substrate. They're like, oh, plasterboard, you mean drywall? Right. No, it's a completely different product. And so I think we kind of have to re-educate the American public from the top down to understand what this stuff is and why it matters and how to fix it correctly.
Yeah, I agree. And the understanding of why building changed in the late 1940s, early 1950s.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. Although I do have a soft spot in my heart for mid-century architecture that those materials were not made to be repaired or maintained.
No, they weren't.
And it's not the same.
Yeah.
So, I definitely agree with you. I've seen it a lot. So my husband actually started working with my parents before I did. we started dating. He was going to school to be an accountant, which makes me giggle now. Like, to imagine him being an accountant makes me giggle.
And look at you guys now, marketing and,
Yes,
social work.
Yeah. So my dad over the summer, when he was like, do you want to come help me? And then Jonathan just never left. He just stayed working with my dad. They worked together for over 20 years. And Jonathan was always the youngest person on the job site. And now he's in his, mid 40s, and he's still one of the younger people on the job site. Now he does have a younger person, but my parents retired. Most of the people that I know that I used to, have in my Rolodex to call, they're retiring. It's just, there's definitely, we definitely have a gap there that we need to fill. And I think some of it was that push towards everybody going to college.
Yeah.
Not that I think that college is bad, but I don't think it's for everybody. And I also, my other irritation just with the common perception is, I don't think it's also for the kids that aren't doing well in school, because you need to have a brain to be able to do this work.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I mean, trade work, there's the physical aspect, of course, there's a skill level, but especially with preservation, but just in general, you have to really be able to critically think and problem solve. And you put really well at the beginning where you mentioned, you have to understand how materials go together.
Right.
If you're just, I'm not going to give the address, but I just have a laundry list of dodgy stuff I've seen. And you're like, if I had a time machine, I would just slap the person who did this in 1920 or whatever. But there's a house downtown and had a raised, partially excavated, but decent crawl space underneath it. And I'm short, but I could stand up, fully. And they installed new ductwork, probably in the last 10 to 20 years. Yeah. And even though they could have dropped the chase below the joists,
right,
somebody who was like, I need to run this ductwork and didn't understand structure, they cut through about 25 joists and they cut almost 2/3 of the mass. And it's a wonder that floor didn't cave.
Oh my goodness.
Because it was long.
We see that, and I'm sure you do too, because you're on the East Coast too. But we see that in colonial houses where the Victorians were adding plumbing. But I wouldn't imagine that somebody would do that now. That's shocking to me.
Yeah, that's what happens when you've got somebody who's, maybe really good at new construction or flipping 80s stuff, who's like, oh, well, I can make some money in preservation. How hard could it be?
Right.
And it just drives home that you can be really good at a trade. And that's hard enough. But when you're working on a building that already exists, there's so many materials and things to consider. And so it's difficult. Project management is difficult too.
It's different. And when, we've been on projects, we do both. We contract directly to homeowners, but then we also work for larger general contractors that need a specialty. And so we've been on a few projects, thankfully not a ton, because usually people just let us do our thing because they know that we'll just do it. But once in a while you get a young project manager that thinks they know more, and they, and then that's usually when the issues begin.
Yeah. Like how hard could it be? Like, I read the textbook. Well, experience we're always shocked. I'm sure you are too, when you just find surprises in a wall. And I don't mean like, oh, the fun glass bottle. I mean like a disaster in the wall. You just don't know. And you can kind of forecast the more projects you see, like you were saying, MCM stuff. I really like it. I mean, it's beautiful stuff, but some of those products weren't really designed to be repairable. That wasn't really the point. And so now it's like, okay, well, we're kind of learning the hard way. That is the shelf life of that type of, mastic that we use to glue those faux stones onto the building. And, you learn as you go.
That's very true. So before we wrap up, I have a couple more wrap up questions, but before we wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to share that you thought of maybe while we were talking that I didn't ask you or you didn't think to mention?
Gee, and I'm never eloquent quickly on the spot.
I always think of things afterwards.
I should have written it down. But, no, I mean, that's the main stuff. I guess a word of advice. I mean, I'm still fairly young. I'm only 37, but when you want to go into something that's different, I mean, most people know conceptually what architecture is. So if you're 18 and you say, I want to be an architect, most people, they understand what that is. But when you say preservation and explain to them what it is, or timber framing and explain to someone what it is, or draw them a picture, because they usually need the picture. It's it seems like this weird niche thing, like, oh, could I even make a living in that?
Yeah.
Do they need more than 5 preservationists in a town? And I think my answer would be, it seems niche, but it's actually a really big, broad field. You know, you can get into advocacy, planning, trade work, I mean, project management, anything in between, real estate. And so just because it's not really part of the modern American lexicon doesn't mean you can't do it, doesn't mean there's not a lot of really good work and cool opportunities.
Yeah,
it just might be a little harder to find it.
I agree with you. I really do. And I think my dad always said there's enough work for everyone. And even through, you know, the worst, the recessions and everything, we've never been without work. So, you know, thankfully, but like that, I think that that's very true. Like, it's not like there's scarcity. There's a lot of people who care about their buildings and want them done correctly.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of the recession, your family's company, you can speak to this really well. People scaled back new construction projects.
Right.
You still have to do work on the buildings that are already there.
Right.
There's going to be that homeowner who said, oh, I was going to do a McMansion 5,000 square foot build. I can't afford to. Maybe instead I'm just going to work on what I already have.
Right. Yeah.
So nothing's recession proof, but I think our work is more so than like,
because maintenance is necessary no matter what's happening.
Yes, 100%.
Very true. Well, is there anything that you would like to promote?
Shameless plug for American College of the Building Arts.
Sure.
So, you know, again, we're a small school, but, and I know I always kind of oversell it, but I think this place is fun to work because our students, regardless of trade, they learn the modern way. I mean, we of course have like state-of-the-art shapers and table saws. We also make you do traditional handwork because really you need both. And like I have a fairly fancy router table, but it takes enough to set up that unless I'm running hundreds of linear feet, I'm just going to get out my hand plane and
that's
do that
exactly what my husband says. He's like, I just need 6 feet of this. He's like, I'm just going to carve it.
Exactly. And you'd think that would be slower, but the setup for modern machinery is such that like, I'm going to cut this. I'm going to do this myself. So this place is fun to work because we kind of do a little bit of everything. Some of them will do new construction. Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze. Some will do preservation, but it's neat to work at a place that's kind of trying to, one place can't, but fix that skills gap, you know, get people to do traditional trades, but also in a modern work setting. So like our students have to take project management, they have to take architectural history. So I think for students who really want to do the trade stuff, there's not really many other college programs, but I would say, you know, to folks, don't be afraid to, you know, do construction work on the side in the summer. If you think you like it, you know, just take an internship, even if you're doing a more traditional, i.e. modern architecture program, you know, branch out. There is such a shortage of work that we're not in that phase anymore where they'd be like, here, kid, have a broom. They'll be like, you're somewhat competent and willing. Like, there's
you have a brain, we can work with this.
I mean, do y'all have that? Do you have just trouble finding staff, finding people?
We do. And so when my parents retired, we had like 20 employees and it was a nightmare. And Jonathan and I looked at each other and said, do we want to go get real jobs? What do we want to do? And we decided to scale back. So right now, Jonathan has an apprentice, and we're working on finding one other. And once in a while, if we need like skilled carpenters, we'll pull like subcontractors in because he needs them for something that's not. It's really hard. What I've found is it's really hard to find carpenters that want to stick with restoration because it's a lot of repair and details, and they want to, you know, come in and frame and be done, you know? Yeah. So that's typically how we handle that. And then my cousin Nora helps me like with the podcast and things like that. So that's our size right now. But I enjoy it a lot more than I did when I had, you know, all the shenanigans of all the different people.
Then it's just, you know, management, and it's less about the project. It is kind of more fun to kind of stick small.
So we've really it was kind of scary at first, but we're getting into a groove, I think. So
Nice.
yeah. So how can our listeners contact you?
I've got a website. It's just butlerpreservation.com.
Okay.
It's probably the easiest because it has, my email and my cell phone number on there. Also, acba.edu, which goes to our main page. And then there's a little faculty button and you can click and send
Perfect.
an email through there.
Okay.
I'd say the website, I'm pretty anxious. And so I check emails kind of constantly, but I'm better about checking my personal one, which is on the website than, for example, if I'm on vacation and it's June, and I know students aren't going to be emailing.
Right, you won't worry about that.
Interning, I get Slack. So reach out through the website because I'll find that quicker.
Yeah, we'll make sure that that's on our site too, so that if somebody's listening, they can just go there and find your episode and then find you. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation and learning about the American College of Building Arts.
Well, thank you. This was a lot of fun, and thanks for tolerating my technical trouble at the beginning.
Oh no, you're fine. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.